This podcast is part of the How We Are network. For information on this episode and many other like-minded shows, visit howweare.org. That's HOWWEARE.org.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins. We're at episode number 98. The guest this week is Mr. Andrew Wade. He is a producer, a dude who records bands and writes music down in Florida. And I don't know, he's recorded a little band. Maybe you've heard of them, called A Day to Remember. Probably like one of the biggest independent bands that's out there right now. So he's in a bunch of other great stuff like Pierce the Veil and a bunch of other bands that are very relevant with the kids these days. That makes me sound old, but I just like to say it like that. Anyways, it's almost been 2 years. The show has been around, which is insane. The 104th episode is our 2-year anniversary. We're like 6 away. It just blows my mind. So anyways, thank you for joining and being a part of this thing. I wanted to get an item of business out of the way for Mr. Andrew. So there's this great website called CreativeLive.com. What they do is they host free online tutorials. Now, I know you hear the idea of online tutorial and you want to fall asleep. This site's amazing, and they're just one of my good friends, does a lot of the stuff on there. So I'm doing this out of the love of him and what that site is. So Andrew, for those of you who are gear people and people that are interested in recording, which I know is a lot of you, go attend his class. It's on March 17th and 18th. It's a CreativeLive class called Recording Rock Vocals. The dude knows how to record the sick vox. I don't even know if that's people say that, but I just thought I'd say that. Go there. Go to creativelive.com and you'll be able to find out all the information for Andrew's class. It's for free. It streams online for hours. It's like a full 7-hour class for free. Just do it. So yeah, March 17th and 18th. Visit there and do that. Anyways, other items of business, propertyofzach.com. Visit there. They got a fun poll up right now, March Sadness, which takes emo bands of all shapes and sizes and pits them against one another in like a NCAA tournament bracket sort of vote thingy. It's fun, so go visit there. And email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com, and visit the website, 100wordspodcast.com. So yes, Andrew, like I said, he's tracked a ton of bands. He's basically one of the hot producers now. I use the word hot. I say it hot like that because he's hot. He's a guy that has after this conversation, I came to find out he's got a good head in his shoulders. He's been in the game for a while and he's worked really, really hard to get where he's at. So I think those of you that are interested in starting something yourself can take a lot of information from this talk. And we touch on a bunch of fun stuff. So you should listen. You will become educated. And I will talk to you after Andrew and I are done talking. That's a lot of talking. Here we go. Personal kind of introduction to what you are doing and what you've been up to. It's one of those things where it's like and I'm sure you've noticed this as well, where it's like the producers behind records, like 10 to maybe 15 years ago, especially within the context of like independent music, it wasn't as important as just the record in and of itself, where it was I personally am 33 years old, and I've been doing this whole independent music thing since I was 14, 15. And so it's like when I was that age, I didn't care about who recorded that stuff. Now I think that's people such as, yourself and obviously a lot of your contemporaries, they know because it's put on a marketing sticker, recorded by this dude,
Yeah.
Was that a weird shift for you to notice that my name's being pimped and I'm sure it's cool, but I'm sure there was elements of oh, that's weird.
Well, I kind of tried to start it out where I would record bands for super cheap, and then I would say, hey, if you don't mind, saying something online or something about me so people know where it came from. Mm-hmm. Because especially for me, I don't know how it was for other people, but I would put in a lot of my own a lot of myself into the records I did because I'm also a musician. I don't know if maybe I pushed that. So like I was really, people would gladly do it. I was never an asshole. So, well, okay, I can't say never.
Nice. You're like, I've never been an asshole. Wait a minute. Let me back
I mean,
up.
I'm pretty easy to get along with. I'm always trying to be, find new ways of doing things, trying to be open-minded about everything, and just always trying to grow. So I think people were pretty supportive of my career and, trying to further me, even if it's just mentioning my name or something like that. But
yeah,
when I was younger, though, I did seek out engineers.
Mhm.
I actually looked. I would look on the back of CDs and see like who recorded stuff. So to me, it was always I kind of always was interested. I don't know why.
Well, no, I mean, I think I do. I look back at, when I first started to get into, the idea of like playing in bands and stuff. It's like, I definitely remember, obviously like Mark Trombino and Steve Evans, like, they were recording like massive records, like, obviously the Blink stuff, and then Steve Evans with like Snapcase and other hardcore stuff, where it was like, I think the only time I actually like paid attention to that is when I like liked the way a record sounded, where it was like, wait a minute, this sounds interesting.
Yeah.
So I could see, but it's cool that you already had that, your awareness was peaked where it's like, who did this? How did they make this?
I don't know. Maybe it was because I wanted to do recordings of my own, like from the beginning, like whenever I started doing music, because going to a studio to me was like, yeah, that's never going to happen. How will I ever be able to afford that?
Sure.
I was just a dumb kid like everyone else.
Right. Well, speaking of being a dumb kid, were you born and raised in Florida?
Yes, I was born in Gainesville and I moved to Ocala on my own at 3 years old, and that was a joke. But
I know, I got it. I didn't want to interrupt that flow right there.
No, so I moved here when I moved to Ocala when I was 3, and then I moved to Orlando where I am now when I'm about 20. When I was like 28. Or something.
Got it. Because I've spent some time in a few random places in Florida, but Gainesville, I spent some time in from, going to like the fest that was there and stuff like that. And Gainesville is such a weird town. I don't know if you have any fond memories or experiences from that perspective, but
yeah, it is pretty weird. It's like everybody has a big town mind in a really small town.
What struck me, and obviously you can spin off this, was, it's a college town, obviously. It's a huge college town. But then you had this weird undercurrent of obviously like a huge independent music scene and like hippies and, sort of like a new age mentality mixed with like, a huge football school. And it's like, it's such a weird, that obviously bled out to the rest of the city.
I've always said that to people. Like, I'm like, something is wrong with the people in Gainesville. No offense to anybody.
Sure.
In Gainesville, but it was a lot of people that were like really into reggae, funk, and jam bands. Like that was like a huge scene in Gainesville. I don't know if it still is now, but for whatever reason, it was that. And then, yeah, like you said, all the people that go to football games and stuff, all the bros, and it's a weird dynamic.
It is
for sure.
I think, and I would actually extrapolate that, and I would say, Florida in and of itself is a very strange place. In touring around the country, you definitely, you see your pockets of like, oh, like here's, Austin, Texas, where it's like, oh, that's a interesting town. But then Florida, like I would say almost every large city has this weird vibe of like, it's like a sprawling suburb, but then it's like you go to Miami and it's like, well, like 8 blocks is gigantic. And then it just goes into suburbs. And then everybody that flocks there, in most cities just have this weird, it's like a mixture of old people, yet it's a cheap place to live. Like, I don't know. I presume that you obviously, there's a reason that you stay in Florida.
Yeah, I just have family here and I like the weather and I don't really have a good reason.
Yeah.
I was raised in Ocala. You got to understand. Ocala is one of the weirdest places. There's this really huge gap in the demographics in Ocala of like people between ages of 18 and like 32. It's like they just don't exist there. And if they do, they're like in hiding or something. I don't know where they are. Everybody's either like really old or really young. I don't know. It's hard to find friends there. And then I moved here to Orlando, and everything changes. I'm like, oh, there's someone that looks like I could be friends with them.
Right. There are peers out here.
Yeah, it's like, okay, this makes sense. I knew I wasn't just imagining that.
Yeah, there are young people that exist out here, not just this huge drop.
I'm not that weird in the world. I'm pretty normal, actually.
Right. So what precipitated the move from Gainesville to Ocala? Like your parents, obviously, like you said. I mean,
it was my dad just got a new job. That's all it was.
Got it. And so what was your household structure like? Do you have brothers and sisters, and what did your parents do for a living?
Yeah, 2 brothers. My parents are still together. They both live in the same house that I grew up in as a kid, in Ocala. And I'm the middle child. I don't know if I have middle child syndrome.
What I don't know what the middle child syndrome actually is described. I'm an only child myself, so I completely know that, but
I actually don't know. People just say it. Like it's a thing.
Right. I'm trying to think. Maybe
middle child syndrome. Right. Sure. I'm a middle child, so I guess I have that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what it would be, because
I don't get enough attention or something, but I feel like I got plenty of attention.
Yeah, maybe it's one of those things, because especially in a family of 3 kids, like you would expect the youngest to be the quote unquote most neglected because they've done it twice before, and they're like, oh yeah, well, we know, like, what's the worst that could happen?
But also the youngest, you got to remember, is the newest baby. So whatever new baby, like everybody's, going crazy over the baby. Oh, let me see. Let me hold the baby. Oh, baby.
Yeah.
Love the baby. So good. If you have good parents, and I had great parents, I mean, they let me record bands in the house when I was in high school, and I couldn't imagine me doing that for my own children.
Yeah.
I would just be like,
nope.
I'm so sorry. My parents were great. You might want to go to grandma and grandpa's house. They might let you do it there, but not here.
Usually it's in reverse, where it's like, my parents didn't let me do this, so I am for sure doing this for my kids.
Yeah, like I look back on it and I was just like, man, that must have been the biggest pain in the ass. We would set up the drums in the living room. I mean, we'd clear the couches out so there'd be enough space for a full drum set and mics and everything. And it would usually be on the weekend. So the time whenever everyone's at the house trying to like relax, I guess, I have, shitty bands coming in and just playing as loud as possible. And
just being the worst.
It was like pretty bad music. I mean, I tried to make the best of it. I think anybody that recorded with me back in the day would probably agree with me anyway. But that was before you could really do anything digitally. Like, they didn't have Steven Slate, and they didn't have Amplitude or, Line 6 stuff. Oh, they did, but it was like really primitive. But so everybody is making a lot of noise.
Right.
Guitars, like you're tracking guitars. There's like, I never did DI, it was just straight to the amp, and the amp was just turned up as loud as you would play live.
When you started tracking, like in those scenarios, were you weren't using like 8 tracks and 16 tracks, were you? Like actually recording to like a DAT tape?
Speaking of tape, let's rewind to the beginning of where this all started.
Yes, let's.
I started, it was me and my friend. His name's Blake. You don't know who he is. Nobody knows who he is. It doesn't matter. We did music together. I had an acoustic guitar, and we started just with, I had like this little karaoke machine, like it had 2 tape decks. So we would record 1 track and then play to it and then record onto another tape as we're playing to that tape. And then we could only do it about 4 times until it was like mostly hiss. So, and whenever we had a song, that our friends liked, and whenever anybody wanted a copy, we would just do a new performance because we didn't want to degrade the tape more.
Dude, that's incredible.
Yeah, so we got really good at the song. It would be interesting to listen to all the versions. I mean, I'm sure they're all really bad, but that's where it started. And then my family had a computer. It wasn't the fastest, but I was like, man, if I could just get this tape onto the computer somehow, then, it wouldn't degrade. I could just keep, recording layers on layers and do whatever. And that's kind of the very, very, very beginning of it.
Because no one had any idea. This is so like in the mid 90s, like no one had any idea how to record anything. So it's like when you found someone with even just like a nugget of knowledge, you would be like immediately latch onto them and be like, oh dude, like, can we record at your house? And it was like, well, I've got like a microphone I can set up in the corner, and that was
a big deal.
Yeah.
That was a big deal to me. Like, okay, so my first band, we recorded with this dude who was, he really didn't know what he was doing. But like you said, when anybody has anything, he had like a 8-channel mixer or something.
Huge.
So
huge.
Me and my band, we're like, this is a professional studio. It was in some ghetto apartment building, but that didn't matter to us. We were really excited.
Yeah.
And it was so terrible. Like the end result, I didn't know anything back then, and it was so bad. I'm like, I think if I took these files, I could make them sound better myself. I convinced one of my brother's friends who had a computer down the street to let me come over to their house and mix this album on their computer.
Right. So good.
Yeah. Yeah. I would do whatever I had to do to get this stuff done. I think it probably sounded like the tiniest bit better, but I felt better about it.
Yeah. You're like, I feel like I can put my stamp of approval on this now.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then after that experience, I was like, you know what? I could do this myself.
Sure.
That's kind of whenever the light bulb went off, and I started just doing my own thing, acoustically, and eventually other bands locally heard it and they wanted to record, and I was like, all right, yeah, awesome. There were these other huge studios in the area, and they would charge them a lot of money. I can't remember. They would spend thousands on like a little demo.
Yeah, like a 3-song demo would be like $3,000.
Yeah, something outrageous, and it would sound worse than anything that I've ever heard. So I was like, no, how about this? How about you come over and I'll record you for $30 a song?
Perfect. $90 for a 3-song demo.
And we did, and it happened, and it sounded not too bad. It really didn't sound that bad. The first band I ever did was called Measure Up, and they were a hardcore band, and I listen to it every once in a while, and I'm always surprised. I'm like, this isn't that bad. This is the first band I ever recorded.
That's so good. How would you paint the picture as far as you, like growing up and your family life? Did you find yourself like caring about school and like getting into sports, and then how did music come into your world?
Yeah, dude. When I was growing up, I had no idea what I was going to be. I actually thought I was going to be an artist because I would draw, and without sounding cocky, like I'm a pretty decent artist.
Okay. In what medium in particular? Like, is it painting, drawing?
No, it was charcoal. I did It started in I was put in advanced classes because of how well I could draw, like based on that. So I got into charcoal in 3rd grade. I would just keep working on my skill all through high school. I was going to become a graphic designer. That's what I thought I was going to do. So I took advanced placement classes. I did this huge portfolio to get into UCF here. It was a limited access program. They only accept about 40 students a year. And I did all this stuff, and I, in the meantime, was kind of doing recordings also, like around high school time. Mm-hmm. And it didn't really dawn on me what I was going to do exactly with my life until I actually went to school for art. I was kind of leaning towards recording at that point, but I didn't know. But as soon as I got to UCF and I'm in this limited access program, I'm thinking I'm going to be inspired and challenged, and I'm going to find people to look up to. And I was so excited to be part of this limited access program. I get there, my teachers don't know shit. I'm one of the best students there, and I feel like I don't know anything.
I could see you showed up to the first day of class just being like, wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and like, dude, I can't wait to dig into this. And then just being like walking into a classroom that feels like a wasteland.
Yeah. My graphic design 1 teacher was against computers.
Oh, that's...
Yeah.
Perfect.
So, yeah, my graphic design 2 teacher, we started to get into Photoshop, and and she was, like going over a lot of things and telling us, instead of like doing shortcuts, having us click through the menus and, like just doing things the stupid way. I don't know. Yeah. Even at that point, I was a very, very, very beginner graphic designer, but I still was like, what is going on here?
Right.
What? Okay. I swear to God, I have to tell the story. I was in class, graphic design 2. We're printing something. I don't remember what it was. I don't know. I got into some argument with the teacher for some reason. I was like, do we have a printer that can print white on this black paper? And she said yes. I was like, okay, awesome. She's like, any of the printers can do that. I was like, what are you talking about? I swear to God, she told me all the colors mixed together to make white.
Incredible.
This is at UCF. This is graphic design 2.
Wow.
I was standing up in the middle of the class, yelling at the teacher, kind of, looking around at everybody, and I'm like, "Are you guys serious?
Yeah.
Like,
Are you hearing this?
Yeah." I'm like, no one is gonna say anything right now. And I quit like maybe a week or 2 after that.
Yeah, you were just fed up.
Yeah, I was like, where am I? What is this? Like, if I started my own graphic design business, and someone came to me and said, hey, I went to UCF, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Like, you're worthless.
Yeah.
You didn't learn anything. So I decided, if I'm going to do my own business, I may as well do something that I absolutely love. And that was recording.
Mhm.
Whenever you're young, you don't know if you like recording because you don't record and you don't know anything about it, but you always have a paper and pencil and you can know if you like to draw. So that's why I think it came later for me.
Sure.
Obviously, there's no way to have experience with it until you actually do it.
Right. But in high school, you started to play music with bands, and obviously, like the stuff that like you said, you first started to record yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like was your family raised as far as like in a religious sense? Like, were you raised Christian? Because obviously, it seems like your roots were definitely entrenched within that Christian music community.
Yes. And may I ask how you know that?
Oh, just, I mean, looking online, just seeing the credits of the bands that you were recording early on, and also the context in which Florida and the South in general seems to be an easy entry point for kids to get into music is usually through the Christian music scene. At least in my own, never being from Florida or being raised in Florida, I just see, it's like you look at bands like, like Shai Hulud, and it's like even though they weren't a Christian band, they had influences and hints at it, and just like seeing every band that's kind of come from Florida, there's like elements of that kind of all over it, The
Christian music scene was really big, especially whenever I was first starting. The first band that I was in, well, actually, all the bands I've ever been in were Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that's just a coincidence. But whenever I was recording at my parents' house, I would not let bands cuss. I mean, I would get trouble, with my parents. And when we're doing vocals, it's pretty obvious. You can hear it.
Right.
Like, I didn't have a soundproof room, so people weren't allowed to cuss. One of the first bands that I did record, I mean, I wouldn't say first.
Mm-hmm.
One of the earlier bands was A Day to Remember, and they had the F word on their first album, in one of the songs that I made them take it out, and Jeremy was really upset about that.
That's pretty amazing that you not only obviously had the conviction within your own beliefs to kind of sit there and be like, hey dude, if you're working with me on this, we gotta take this out. I don't think I've heard of a story in which obviously a producer, obviously I'm sure at that time you weren't really, you're considering yourself more of a engineer in training, but a person to kind of have that, put that stamp on there. But
yeah, I'm always trying to be as, professionally minded as I can be.
Of course.
And that's something, it was almost like, do I choose to remain in the Christian music industry only?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I allow myself to do, to be as limitless as possible with music production?
Sure.
And I think I'm always, that's not just in my recording life, but in my personal life too. I'm always trying to think of how can I better myself? How can I be more efficient? How can I, see things in a different light all the time? And it's helped me in my recording career because, there's a lot of people that'll find one way to do something and then they'll just stick to it and they'll never grow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and I mean, I saw that with all the studios that closed down as I'm growing, as a producer, and people that I used to look up to, and I've passed them, and I totally know why. They just get stuck in this funk. They got some compliments from friends and family, and that's good enough. And they do what they do, and that's that. So
yeah, that's a very interesting point, because I think anybody that grows up with independent music can totally see that, especially from a studio or producer standpoint, where it's like, someone in the area is hot for like a year, everybody goes and records with them, and then that they kind of move on because all the bands that are of that sonic sound have recorded with them, and then now they maybe want a different experience, so they're using someone else, and that person is locked into, well, dude, I just do metal hardcore. Like, where's the other young bands coming up? And like, there might not be for the next year or two or whatever.
And I think about that all the time. I'm like, what makes somebody hot? What makes people want to go to a producer?
Mm-hmm.
And I think dynamic with your sound is really important, because there's always different ways to do things, and there's never quite a best way in theory, like just differences,
sure,
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So someone that I really look up to is like Chris Lord-Alge. Sometimes I'll just listen to a recording that I didn't even know he did, and I'm like, man, this recording sounds awesome, and it just sounds completely different than anything that he's done before, but it still sounds great. And that's the kind of producer or engineer, mixer, whatever, that I want to be. I want to be able to figure out what is great and what is, not so great, what is mediocre.
Mm-hmm.
And learning that, not, hey, whenever you use this guitar with these strings, it sounds good. I want to know what sounds good no matter what, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah, no matter what music you are recording, there are elements that are obviously similar, especially if you're talking about rock music. Like, it doesn't matter if you are, an acoustic rock artist that obviously has elements of, electric in it, versus, a black metal band. At the core of it, there's going to be similarities, and you just obviously have to figure out the nuances that make it different.
Right.
Yeah.
What's good about this sound? And it's not just, the way things sound. It's also about music and music writing. A lot of people are blinded by things like, if Miley Cyrus, for instance, is singing a song and they're like, oh, this is Miley Cyrus. But it's like, well, hold on a second. Are you listening to the song? Because this song is incredible, and she had nothing to do with writing it. So it's easy to get caught up in things on a smaller scale like that. Somebody brings in a Schecter guitar or something,
right? Or brings their Metal Zone pedal,
right? Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Totally.
You're like, yeah, I'm not even going to try this.
I mean, but, it's safe. Let's be honest. It's safe to write off a Metal Zone pedal. It's okay.
Yeah. But you know what I mean.
I know. Your point's taken.
Yeah, it's.
Did you, as you were going through high school, like, did you actually tour with the bands that you played in, or I mean the projects that you were working on? I'm sure it was smaller scale, but did you...
just like East Coast tours, very small, some just around Florida, and that's when I knew that I hated being in a band. I was like, you know what? Because we played to, like, I don't know, a few hundred people sometimes, and that was cool. I was like, it would only get bigger than this. I don't care. I'm like, I'd rather stay at home and, make music and just be home with my friends. And
that's so interesting that you had, because it totally, so many people don't understand, what it's like to tour, even on a smaller scale. And it's like, there are certain people that I know I personally have played with over the years, and I know anybody that like tours experiences this, where it's like, you head out for a week or even longer than that, and you can point out the people in the band that are just like, you're not going to last. You don't like this. Like, and exactly what you're saying of like, yeah, this doesn't necessarily give me the satisfaction of, whatever, being in the center of attention and playing in front of people and stuff. That's interesting that you had that switch go off for you, where it's like, yeah, I don't need this.
Yeah, we had great responses sometimes. You have those certain crowds just completely freak out, and it makes you feel great and stuff. But maybe it's because I had other options.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe other people are like, man, nothing in my life has ever been like this. So, no offense to anyone, but so maybe that's why. But to me, I'm like, I mean, I don't really care about this at all. And more recently, I have gone out touring in style, with A Day to Remember.
Right.
And it was fun every once in a while, like, because I would go out with them and do pre-production on a laptop or whatever to help write, or just, whatever they wanted me to do for that kind of stuff. And we would have time off, and it would be fun to be in other countries. But I mean, being away from home that long really took a toll on me. It was just fun at the beginning, and then a month in, it's just like, man, I don't want to be here.
Is it just the removal of the things that you are obviously like comfortable with from family relationships and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it's totally it's a complete relationships, and it's a completely different schedule that you have to get used to.
Yep.
Not just because of the different time zones, but I can't, I'm not, every morning I'm not guaranteed to, drive down the street and get a sausage, egg, and cheese McGriddle from McDonald's or something. You know what I mean? Like,
sure,
the things I know I could do are gone. There's nothing you can do. You're in a new spot. You're in a new country. You're in a new state. You don't know what the fuck is around you.
Sure.
Sometimes you won't have Wi-Fi. Like if you're in Europe, there's no Wi-Fi sometimes, or there's no cell phone reception. So you literally can't check anything, and you don't even know where you are sometimes.
Yeah.
Kind of frustrating.
Sure. Yeah,
I kind of like that, knowing things are there, and
the regularity of it all. It's understandable.
Being regular. I guess I'm just super boring or something.
Well, no, I personally have never viewed it like that. Like people that I've toured with that that have eventually fallen out of it. I totally get it. Like not everybody is cut out to do that. Like the whole, because there's so many elements of like hurry up and wait, where it's like, oh yeah, we load in at like 2 and oh my gosh, doors aren't until 8 and I don't have any way to get around. Like there's so many elements that just you understand why people don't like it. So I totally
there's a lot of sitting around.
Like, so much. And so so then as you eschewed playing in bands and started to focus on production and stuff like that, how did it sit with your parents that you obviously were involved in music and involved in kind of a DIY community that they had a context for, because they let you record bands in their living room and stuff like that. But was there any friction there as far as like, I don't know what Andrew's doing, he may be throwing his life away?
Especially the phone call I made to my parents about dropping out of school. I mean, this is after I completed high school with over a 4.0, and I got my AA already, and I was like less than halfway through my bachelor's. And that's when I told them, I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm going to come home and do recording. And they were pretty upset, and they were upset for a long time after that too. Mm-hmm. Even after I was in magazines for having like most anticipated album that I was doing, and great things happening. I had Dave Shapiro as my manager. My mom was not stoked about it. She's like, you should always have a degree just in case.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I love my parents. They've always been really helpful and supportive. They are definitely warmed up to it now. That they're very proud.
You have a track record.
Yeah, but back in the day, they weren't so excited. But It happened. I think one of the turning points for my mom is when she's sitting next to some dude on the airplane, and they started talking. And I think it was a guy who owned or wrote for Substream magazine.
Yeah. So random.
Yeah, and he knew who I was. And she's like, what? Like, you know who my son is? And the guy's like, yeah, it's like one of the best places to record in, this area south of, I don't remember what he said. I think it started to become very real when things like that would happen.
Sure. What do your parents do for work?
My mom's a elementary school teacher, and my dad is a parts clerk at Ring Power.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, clearly the musical context of making a living out of the arts is hard for them to kind of wrap their head around, I'm sure.
Yeah, no one in my family does music for a living. My aunt is talented with singing, but she doesn't really get paid from it or anything.
Yeah, they've got no context for it, so they see you being like, "Hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to record bands, and I'll get a studio," and they're just like, "I don't know about that."
To me, it wasn't like I'm going to do this. To me, I'm like, I am doing this. As soon as it was actually that phone call. I made that phone call the same day that I made the choice to drop out of school. I'm like, you know what? This is what I'm going to do with my life. And ever since I made that choice, I had absolutely no doubt of what I was going to do, and that I would be successful with it, because I would do whatever it took. And I still am doing whatever it takes.
I think it's cool when people obviously can kind of strip all the noise away and just be like, all right, at this point, there's no plan B, there's a plan A. And this is literally, there's no other choice but to make this my thing. And hopefully I'll find success in it.
Yeah.
With, obviously your early days of kind of starting out especially because you come from a background of obviously being an artist as far as, playing, creating music and stuff like that. Was it difficult for you to start to shift your head into the idea of like being a business, where it's like, oh man, I got to figure out how to do this. Like I got to figure out how to invoice. And was that a struggle?
Yeah, that shit annoys me. I hate it so much.
Sure.
I don't really have many bills well, compared to other like businesses and stuff. I've had this conversation with my business manager, but they're like, you don't have many bills and you don't have any employees. So kind of like, you could do this on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I will pay someone $1 million to do this. I will not do taxes. I will not pay invoices. Like it's my job to be creative and not be bothered by all these numbers. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Although math was one of my strongest subjects in school.
Yeah, because it's funny because you strike me as a person, just in hearing the way that you describe yourself, and obviously the few little bits of knowledge you've shared, where it's like you're obviously like you're an intelligent guy, and obviously you've got a good head on your shoulders, but you have the ability to identify, not only what gives you displeasure, but like any sort of weaknesses you may have, where it's like, okay, I know I shouldn't do that. Get that as far away from me as possible, which is which is good, because sometimes people, fake it and they're doing things that they really shouldn't be doing, and they're doing a bad job at it.
Especially like taxes, man. I don't want to be audited by the IRS and then, I have no idea what to do, and I'm just
for the work that you're obviously, you've been doing, and you obviously will continue to do. Do you find a lot of because like you said, you obviously challenge yourself to push past the idea of like, okay, I'm simply only recording Christian artists, and I'm not going to touch the secular music market. Do you find did you find yourself having to kind of like balance that initially, or that was obviously, like you said, you kind of wanted to make yourself limitless from that perspective?
Well, when I started, I just basically didn't allow cussing. They didn't have to be a Christian band,
mm-hmm.
but I didn't allow cussing. I was really like winging it hard whenever I started.
Right.
There was no
focus,
no clear path. Yeah, I was just like, hey, I like doing this, and I'm making some money. Cool.
Right.
I made $90 in only 2 days. Damn, that was a lot.
I'm rolling.
Yeah. So to me, it was a job too. I mean, not a job. It never felt like a job. It still doesn't feel like a job.
Right.
I say job. Here's a little secret about me. I say job to make other people feel better about themselves.
Well, it's true. Because I think there's a huge difference between work and a job, because a job defines the...
Or no, I say work. Yeah, I'm like, I got to go to work. Right. But I always feel funny when I say it, because it's like, I'm my own boss, like I get stuff done whenever I get it done, that's when it's done, you know? Like I only have so many hours every day and I do things the way I do them.
Sure.
So when I say I'm going to work, I still to this day feel funny saying that.
What was your like, and obviously throwing back to when you were in high school and stuff, like, because how did you get introduced to kind of, like your entry point into like independent music? Like what was your, who showed you stuff, and obviously what was your first things you started to cut your teeth on?
Well, the most learning that I ever did was from the first recording that we ever did with this dude named Jeremiah. And I kind of just emulated what he did. And I bought, like an 8-channel mixer myself. And I would just have, whenever I would do drums, they would all just go to that mixer. I would EQ them on the mixer, and I would have 2 channels to record with. And that was it for a long time.
Sure.
So that's
what was your own, like, your own personal tastes? Like, how did they develop through high school as far as like the bands that you were into and stuff like that? How did that?
Oh, wait, the bands I listen to or the bands that I record?
Yeah, well, no, you answered a question I was going to ask, later, but no, like the bands that you were personally listening to, like how did you get into, music as an overall sort of thing?
My friend Jeremy Midcap, not McKinnon, in middle school, he showed me No Innocent Victim. Do you remember that band?
Oh, dude, being from Southern California, of course. No Innocent NIV, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, this is it, man. I was like, this is awesome. I thought it was so good. So I started with like the heaviest stuff, that you can get into right away is tough guy hardcore.
Right. So like what was it like, Face Down Records and Solid State stuff?
Yeah. I got into like Staves Acre and
great band.
Project 86.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Blindside's old shit.
Oh yeah.
I was like really stoked on that. I did start off straight up like not so melodic. Oh, MXPX's first album, I can't remember what it was called, but I listened to that like on repeat. Feel sorry for my parents. But I also wasn't allowed to listen to screaming music.
Oh, you had to sneak it around.
Yeah, I did, even though it was Christian. And my parents sat me down in the living room because they found that I had an Under Oath CD.
Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah. But it was Active Depression. I think that was like one of their first albums.
Oh, yeah.
And they were listening to it, and they're like, what do you like about this? And they were going through the lyrics, like criticizing them and stuff. And I was like, I don't know. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, you're like, I can't articulate that. I'm like,
yeah, like I like it.
I'm 15.
Yeah, and they, they've been supportive, but they smashed that CD.
Wow.
It's
so funny too, because it's like, from my own personal experience, it's like, I cut my teeth on a lot of, like Christian music, as far as like that sort of Christian independent music, while I was also listening to a bunch of, regular sort of like beginner hardcore, like Earth Crisis and Strife and stuff like that. But I always found it so funny because I had friends that were raised in a strict Christian household. And it's like, once they started to bring that stuff home, like the No Innocent Victims and that sort of stuff, it was like, they were basically, it was like them pissing in the face of convention. And it was like, wait a minute. And it's like, dude, compare this to the rest of the stuff. This is great. Like, what they are doing is a positive thing. And just because they're yelling, you can't look past that, apparently, as parents.
Yeah, that's what it was. And I had no good answer for that. Like, well, if this is Christian, why does it sound so demonic? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just,
like, to me, I was like, that's a good point. I have no argument.
Sure.
I've heard, they say shout to the Lord. That was the only thing I think of. Like, he's shouting.
Right. And I found that era, it's so interesting too, because obviously since it was, in its infancy, it was still trying to figure out how to, not only build an audience within the context of of the audience they were trying to build, but how they were, they're just kids, like, and
right.
They had this magnifying glass on them to be like, oh, well, is this really a good representation of our faith? And it was like, dude, they're 18. Like, is anybody representing the faith appropriately at 18 years old? I would imagine like 4% of what you would define Christians as doing that. And so as you started to develop your music taste further, did you find yourself obviously leaning more towards, softer and more popular stuff?
I really don't know why. I don't know if it's because I record it so much, but I totally listen to like super white people music, like Fleet Foxes and
Oh, sure.
and Coldplay and M83 and stuff like that. Like it's just not even like I like Arcade Fire a lot, stuff
Right.
like that.
Yeah, you like beard guy music.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do not like any heavy music. Like I'll listen to what's like modern stuff right now just to see like what's, what people like. And it helps me, and it's really easy for me to understand what's good about it, because I help write stuff all the time. So I don't know. Yeah,
Well, I think it's interesting because everybody that I've had an interaction with as far as like them making a successful career out of recording and producing and songwriting and stuff, they don't attach themselves to a scene, so to speak. Because you have your producers who travel like completely alongside of a scene and not only record a majority of bands within that scene, but they themselves are also participants, whether or not it's them playing in a band themselves or, going to shows and like being part of that community. And it sounds like you obviously you have a casual distance with it, which, in my perspective, like helps you be able to offer probably different ideas than people would typically think of in the context of whatever it is they're recording with you.
Right. Yeah. I feel like there's not like one style that's going to last forever. It's always going to be evolving.
Mm-hmm.
So I figure, why not? What's the harm in listening to other stuff? Like you said, it could only add a different perspective.
Sure. And the last thing I'll hit on before I let you go is I always find it interesting when people themselves like start to notice that like things are going well, so to speak. I mean, obviously the story that you shared with, your mom kind of realizing that like, oh, my son isn't, a miserable failure and will end up in the gutter in like 5 years. Like when did you yourself start to notice, like your either the perception of you be like, oh wow, like I didn't think that I'd be getting hit up by like this many bands and I'd have to be saying no to a lot of projects, or like, when did you feel that start to change for yourself?
I don't know. I feel like it was pretty gradual, because there were some times when I kind of thought it might happen because I did a record that I really liked, but nobody cared.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And then,
so you had your idea, you had your sight set on something just because you thought the quality of the product was there, but then for one reason or another it didn't hit from a public perspective.
Right. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just throw that dream away for now. But it happened slowly. I think maybe the biggest change for me was when I recorded the Homesick sessions with A Day to Remember, and my character, the Big Boss, was created, and people recognized me in public from that. And that's when I was like, that's whenever I thought, something's going on here. And I feel like things have just gotten more and more chaotic for me. I mean, I feel like I'm changing the focus of my career even still because of all the opportunities I've been given like with the CreativeLive thing and, just writing with A Day to Remember. And
on that same note, does the idea of like obviously being kind of the, what you shied away from when you were playing in a band, like the public eye or the adulation and stuff like that, or adulation, does that stuff sit differently with you now? Like, or are you comfortable with like, oh no, like I'm okay being recognized in public because of these things,
Oh yeah. It's fine. I mean, I'm over it. Like I do write my own music, and it's completely different than the stuff I record. But I think I'll be putting more of that stuff out. So I want to try to shift into maybe different genres a little more, or into more writing. We'll see how it goes. I'm always hopefully optimistic about these things.
Sure. Well, that sounds great. I mean, you've developed a knowledge about your name and obviously your talents, and it's cool just because then you're able to parlay that into different things that can open you up to, you know, new and exciting experiences, which is basically what anybody hopes to do with anything creative. Good job. Way to not ruin it, dude.
Thank you. No, I just want you to know that during this whole conversation, I'm staring at a picture of a baby.
You are on my, that is my child. He is,
So like in my head, this is who I'm talking to. Like,
I know. I realize that
the baby with sunglasses on.
Yeah. He's just chilling. He was, I'm fairly certain I was holding him on my chest, but yeah, that is my son. He's only maybe another year older than that. So
and that's not you. That's not you.
That is my son. That is my son. But his name is Raymond, and he's Raymond the Fourth. So technically, in some weird way, you are kind of talking to me.
I feel like your voice is coming from his mouth. So
that's good. I'm glad this. So this will obviously be the first interview you've ever done with a baby. So I'm very glad about that.
Me too, stranger.
So there you go. He's a sweet dude, right? I felt very at ease on Skype with him, just kind of BSing. I definitely, I feel bad because sometimes I don't want to interrupt a person with my laugh when they tell a joke, like as you heard towards the beginning of the interview. But yeah, it's just funny sometimes. That's why I like to do these things in person, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way. But anyways, go to Andrew's class, CreativeLive.com. Recording rock vocals, visit there. PropertyofZach.com, 100wordspodcast.com. The editor for this episode is Tom Richfield. Such a good dude. I can't say it enough. I just love him. And yeah, until next week, be safe, everybody.
You can cry.